Okay. When last we were doing stuff, get rid of these files I was doing for testing stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go to my dev branch. And I'm going to make a new branch, scoring. It said score. So I'm probably going to go for something like some sort of progressive scoring system where for every second longer that you last, that your score value goes up by some amount, and then the difficulty would progress by some amount. Like, say, every 30 seconds, the difficulty would go up, and then the score would go up as well. So I've got a difficulty setting here, so I could use that probably as my scoring multiplier potentially too. We can try to play with it. So first, I just need to have some sort of score. I probably want to put it with the player because it is the player's score. So I'm going to go down to the player and put in this dot score equals 0. And since I was playing around with getters and setters, I'm going to do that here as well. So I'm going to put a new. Actually, I don't want to do that with the score. What I'm going to do is so I have to use something called object that define properties. So I have to use the master object, which means capital O. Can I see that okay? And make sure I'm recording. Cool, yeah, I am. Object.define properties. I can't remember if it's a capital or not. I think it is. And define properties takes two values, at least as one of its versions. One is the object it's going to apply it to. Well, since I'm inside the player itself, I'm going to apply it to this. So this, and then the next one is a object. Now I could put a string, and the string would be the name of the property I want to do, but I'm going to put an object so I can do multiple properties. And inside there, I'm going to define a property of score, and it's going to be an object. And inside there is going to be get, which is a function, and set, which is also a function. So how this will operate is that for all intents and purposes, score will appear to be a property. But if I go to set the score, then the score will be actually going through this set function. So if I say, player.score equals 5, it'll actually go through that function, and my value, my new score, will come in as a parameter there. If I do, for example, like console log player.score, it will instead go through this function here, and use that function to give me the score by whatever value it returns. So I'm going to put a thing up here of this dot internal score is equal to 0. I can also do it other ways too, but we'll keep it a little bit closer to what you guys know since I'm just exploring it myself too. And in this case, I'm going to return this dot internal score. And for set, I'm going to do something like check if I'm setting it for a number or not. So if not is nan new score, then this dot internal score is equal to new score. So basically saying if it's a number, then set it. Does that make sense? So let's give it a shot. So how do I want to access the player? Get one. Console, okay. So it's game.currentPlayer.score is 0. Oops, I hit by a square eventually. If I say, I'm going to put a console log over here so you can see that the code is doing something. Console.log score getter called. Console.log score setter called. Some time to get whacked. Huh?
Will that console log run like crazy?
No, shouldn't. So you can see there, score getter called. So when I just called .score, even though it's not a function, it called a function. And if I say score equals 5, score setter was called. Now if I do that, it gets the old score, and I'm still using the function to do it. So now I can control both the data that comes into that property and what comes out of that property. Sure, that's probably a little confusing, so I'll let you guys kind of absorb it for a second.
So the reason you would use the get and set in the first place is so you could do some sort of manipulation to whatever will eventually go in the score? Or...
Yeah, well, like your only other option is, like we've done before, is, for example, like change lives. You know, and I have to have a function, then I have to, if someone accesses lives directly, then I don't have a choice about how they do it. Whereas with a getter or setter, I can actually control how that property is accessed. It's a very common thing in classical object-oriented coding. I really gotta have something to stop this game. Game.stop game loop. That didn't do it. Pause, was it? Well, game over also works. So, anyway, in classical object-oriented coding, as opposed to prototypal object-oriented coding, it's very common to have what we call protected variables. And protected variables can only be accessed, or private variables can only be accessed from the object itself, or in the case of protected variables, only from the object itself or anything that inherits from the object. So if I were to try to access if I were to try to access the object, or sorry, the property directly, it wouldn't exist. But I could have a function that's like get that property, like get name, for example. And get name reads the property name, and then I can access it that way. That way I can control access to that property. In JavaScript, there are ways of doing it, but we're not directly made that way. There are tricks in JavaScript you can do to make private variables. That being said, getters and setters are only available very recently, like JavaScript 5, ECMAScript 5. So this allows me to control that access. And like, for example, now if I were to put in a letter, like down here, I could say else console.error score must be a number. Some sort of like transition state, like it determines that they're, oh, it keeps creating them, that's why. So pause followers, I'll have to make it sort of like, stop. Okay. What were they doing? Oh, yes. Game.currentPlayer.score equals hello. Right? Now I can control what's in there, whereas before I couldn't.
And then, like, if you were doing the, like a score multiplier or something, some function like that,
Well, potentially. Like, I'll probably just say something like, you know, I can say game.currentPlayer.score score plus plus. And that called the getter and the setter. See how that happened? That's kind of cool. It's kind of reinforcing how plus plus is pulling the value out, incrementing it, and putting it back in. It called the getter and then the setter. I don't know, that jazzes me when I see like that sort of validation of what I think is going on under the hood. I get giddy when I see stuff like that. So
would it be good to use plus plus if we're trying to increment the score constantly and trying to show it as the data is running?
Say again? One more time, same thing.
Would it be beneficial to be using like the plus plus if we're trying to get a score and also setting it as a data?
No, we wouldn't want to use a score. We want to add on to like plus equals instead, because the score that we're adding to it is variable. Yeah. At first, it could be like 1 point a second, but then as the difficulty ramps up, the multiplier on that additive score will be more.
I guess that's what I meant to say, because if the plus equals the same, I guess
it's more variable, more dynamic, which could be considered more robust, yeah. But it's the same thing, right? It's just plus equals 4. Same thing happens. Getter's called, setter's called. I found this a long time ago, but I could never really find it for how to figure out how to do it for constructors, which was my preferred way of doing object-oriented. I don't like doing it through object literals, if possible. There are other ways, like factories, for example, you can do the same thing. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll have to do that. And then I think, oh, wait, okay, cool. I can define the first property as this, and that'll work inside the object. So then I can go back to the way I like doing things.
I guess since I missed this last week, where was object defined? So object.define properties? Or is that?
Remember, it's a capital O object, which means it is the progenitor object. Just like capital M math is the progenitor math object. Capital A array is progenitor A array. So whenever you see a basic, like there's number with capital N, for example, I could say var n is equal to new number 5. Now n is a number object 5, which is really all what it n would have been in the first place. If I had said var n is equal to new number, n equals 4. But you can see how it's like sort of the base object underlying everything. With to fix, to local string, to precision, to string, all the stuff that a number would normally have. Same thing for strings.
Can you do math on it?
Huh?
Can you do math on it when you make it look good?
I don't know. Let's see. I'm assuming you can.
N plus 1 would be 6. Oh, yeah.
It's the basic underlying thing that gives you all numbers, which kind of which kind of shows you how everything in JavaScript is an object. Numbers are objects, strings are objects, everything's an object. That's why arrays, when you do type of array, you get an object because it's actually everything is an object, and they just didn't bother to make it a data type of array because it's not really even an array. It just behaves like an array. But that doesn't make sense until you get more into data structures, which will be starting Thursday for Zero Period. Okay. So, so I've got that in there, so I can just say current player.score plus plus and whatever, and it'll be fine. So in my games game loop, I'm going to put something in there for scoring. So its game loop is right here, where it says faller spawn chance check, and I'm also going to do then this dot player score update. And then here I'm going to say, okay, well, what's my difficulty? It is game settings dot difficulty. So var score delta is equal to this dot game settings dot difficulty times, and we have to have something for like what would the score be, like some sort of incrementer. So I'm going to have up here under game settings, I'm going to have scoring. I'm going to have score per second. I'm going to put, like, say, 1. And score per interval is null. And under my initialization, this dot initialize scoring. This dot initialize scoring is equal to function, and I'm going to say that this dot game settings dot scoring dot score per interval is equal to this divided by the game loop interval. That's 1,000. This divided by 1,000. Right. So what I basically do is I want to make it so it's dynamic, so that if I change the interval of the the game, the heartbeat of it, that it will always properly increment the scoring value. So if, for example, I was updating every half a second, I would want to update it half a point each time, but I don't want to have to make that manual code. So the game loop interval is 1,000. Divided by 1,000 would be 1. Okay, that should work. What happens if I made the game loop interval 500? That would be divided by, I think it should be then times that. Because if I did divided by 1/2, that's actually times 2. And then, just to clear up our math a little bit, then up here in my initialized scoring, okay, that's good. And then that means I can take this guy, score interval, score per interval, and times that. And say this dot current player dot score plus equals for delta. With me?
Just go back up so they.
This part here? Basically, I'm trying to make it so that if I change the game loop time, like if I need to change it down to, like, say, pulsing every 1/10 of a second, that I'm not suddenly increasing my score rate because of it.
Right.
I'll be decreasing my score per pulse, and I won't have to set it manually every time.
Your game loop interval is already at 1,000. So it's right now,
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Do we have tissues here anymore? Like actual tissues? Yeah.
I don't know if we still have some. Toilet paper is probably your best bet. And then we should also have something that checks the difficulty. Like after a certain period of time, it updates the difficulty. Although first I really want to just test the scoring. So what I'm going to do is
I mean, you would be setting thresholds for, I guess,
I'd probably do it like some doubling value. So like, for example, the first one would be 10 seconds, and then the score would, let's say the difficulty would double or whatever it would be.
Okay.
And then the next check would be in 20 seconds, and then the next check would be in 40 seconds, and the next check would be in 80 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Something potentially like that. That's a pretty easy one. Okay, so where was I? There it is, game loop. Okay. This dot player score update. And in here, I'm going to console.log this dot current player dot score. Error in line 30. Oops, comma. So it's not going up by anything, so that's a little disconcerting. Also, I probably want to get rid of that console log. And then we will go into, bam. into sources. Go into the game loop and put a check there. All right. So score is 0. Score delta is also 0. So let's check up here. Score per interval is 0 still. It never got updated, maybe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to where it should have been updated, right here, and refresh the page and see if it ever gets called. It does. Okay, so it gets called. Game loop interval is 1,000. 1,000 divided by 1,000 is 1. Score per interval. Oops, that was my fault. I didn't use the right value. I was supposed to use score per second. So this, as soon as I saw null, I'm like, oh, hey, that's the wrong one. If it was 0, I might think it's something. It was just somehow the wrong value. But I'm like, oh, wait, that's null. It should never have been that. So this should be score per second. Take away my breakpoints so I actually see it run. Go to the console. Okay, there's our ticking up score. It'd be nice to display it somewhere. Or I could do it, instead of off of seconds, I could do it based upon how many boxes pass me. Now I could cheat that a little bit. I could just base it on when boxes die, right? Right now I'm just surviving a certain amount of time, but I don't know, how do you want to do it? Guy preferences? Got any voices?
I got lost. Can you repeat that?
Right now I'm just incrementing the score based upon number of seconds I'm surviving, not based upon number of blocks that pass me. You want to do it based off blocks passing me or off of number of seconds I survive?
How would it work if we did both?
You mean like as a bonus?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
If it's a standard score for being alive, and if you dodge like a really fast small block, then you get X amount.
That's true. You could do like a bonus thing based upon number of like the type of block that it was. If it was like, it could have a multiplier based upon its speed and its size. Okay.
Maybe bonus points for dodging in close proximity, like barely dodging each
Okay, so one step at a time.
one.
Cool.
I
like that.
I really gotta make pause followers actually stop everything. Thought I had a pause game or something in here.
I think those red blocks were all those from the Wi-Fi.
I blame them all from that.
Okay, so pause game. What do we need to do? We need to stop the loop. So we're going to do this dot pause fallers, and before that, I'm going to do this dot stop game loop. And I'm going to put a property up here of this dot pause equals false, and down here, if this dot paused, else And here, this dot start game loop I think that actually would go through. I think that actually might be enough, but let's find out. Game dot pause game. Oh, still made a new one. Still doing the creation. The create followers is happening. Follower spawn check. Follower spawn check happens there once, but it also should happen in the. That's weird. I thought I did it in the loop. Yes, follower spawn chance check. And if the loop stopped, it shouldn't be going further forward. So let's put a console.log here and actually see if it's running. Well, it certainly is. All right, so why is stop game loop basically just failing? Let's put a breakpoint on 77. All right, so this dot game loop is, oh, hey, wrong thing entirely. Woo, good job, Dan. That should be game loop timer, not game loop interval. So everyone can make boneheaded mistakes. Good. Let's try to unpause it. Let's probably make the timer run again, although the loop's not running. Oh, right, because they didn't actually change the pause value. And really, I'd need to reverse this logic. I don't have to. I can do it in here. This dot paused is equal to not this dot paused. So true becomes false, false becomes true. Like, what was that? Hot time, or what was that one where you dodged things when things were moving slowly? Super hot. Huh? Huh. Oh, damn, didn't start again. So it started spawning them, but didn't start the guys going. So let me pause fallers, went to the fallers and did a pause action. So we need one that's like unpause.
The things that decide if they're pausing or unpausing.
Well, it did. The faller is the one that stops itself. It's just I told it to run its stop function.
Would it be better if it was on the game?
No, because the faller is responsible for whether or not it falls, but I tell it whether it should fall. Or it's responsible for making itself fall. I just basically say, hey, stop falling. Stop that obeying of gravity. So up in my pause game, this dot unpause fallers, and basically the same thing. Unpause. I do this with functions in the console long before I attach them to buttons. I usually put the buttons on afterwards. Like, okay, I got the function, now I can attach it to the, to the button somewhere. Okay, so first thing we need to do, if we're going to do a incremental score based upon the faller, is to let the faller know what score it's worth. So since it knows how big it is, it also knows how fast it's moving. So I'm going to go down to the faller. And, well, first off, I'm going to commit. Added initial scoring, also fixed that darn pause bug, added additional pause functionality for true game pausing. Fixed bug with blocks still spawning even while paused. Okay. Back to the code. I don't know if you guys sense this or not when I do this stuff. I just love doing stuff like this. I love making little stupid things like this. I like making things, especially from scratch, with as few like libraries as possible, just to, I don't know. For me, it's kind of like what some people get joy from, like gardening or working on car engines. I get it from doing this. So each one needs to know what it's worth. So I'm going to say something like this dot score value, which sounds wrong. Point worth. Whatever. And then under its initialization, after it figures out where I set the different things about size and whatnot, it's based upon the width, but the thing is, the width is based upon the CSS stat. So I could do something like, what would it be? The bigger the block is, the more it's worth. The faster the block is, the more it's worth.
Should be both,
right? Huh?
Shouldn't it be both?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's two different adjudicators of the score. There's the speed of the block and the size of the block. If it was a fast-moving, huge block, that's worth the most points. So,
can we set it based off of the CSS stats that we
say again? Oh, yeah, potentially. I was thinking like the way that you'd really want to do it to make it more robust would be to have.
What about thresholds for the sizing?
Hmm?
What about like ranges for the sizing of the blocks? I'm not sure what the size is particularly, but from 200 pixels to 400 pixels or whatever. That's like this range for this story.
You know, it's interesting. Let's try something weird. I mean, it's basically going to be an illegal CSS trait, but I wonder if the CSS will allow me to, it'll still try to apply it even though it is not a valid trait. I mean, we do with attributes all the time. Why not CSS? So let's give that a shot. So game.fallers, fallers, that's my array there, sub0 dot, where was it? It's player. No, that's player.
Is it that fall function?
I'm just wondering, create element. This dot faller element. That's what it was. Faller element. So there's the element dot CSS. I can't do nothing apparently. What I call that? Score value. Undefined. Damn. But let me see. It might have an invalid property on it. Yeah, it's there. Let's see if we can see something like the width property. That is definitely there. 128 pixels, basically what it was rendered as. Well, my other option is I was going to go based off the size and then just use some sort of baseline based on the ratio of the, maybe the player size or something. Like for every time that it's the player size, actually, because no, the smaller the player is, the easier it is. I'm just going to get a basic score going then. I could think about this forever, come up with a billion solutions that would all potentially be wrong. So for now, we'll just do a hard-coded sort of thing in terms of like, let's say 100 pixels based off that. So Faller.prototype. Oh, for those of you that just joined us, make sure you go to aws.amazon.com. If you don't already have an Amazon account, you need to set one up. Go to aws.amazon.com and sign up for the AWS services if you haven't already. Okay, so this thing is going to be based off of, where did I do that thing where I had the check collision off, check collision on? Where's my check collision? Oh, there it is, right there. So I'm going to do up here is I'm going to also set its score value. This dot set score value. And the score value, because then I'll actually know what the width and height is. So I'm going to say, okay, let's just get some values. Width is equal to this dot Faller element. Actually, I've got the width up here. Actually, it's going to be right down here. But I don't necessarily know it yet. Oh, I do, okay. So something else sets it up here. Fall does. Oh, and then that's right, fall gets redefined. So rather than here, which really doesn't matter, but I think I'd rather do it up here anyway. So I've got the width already, this dot width. Let's say var width scaling factor is equal to this dot width divided by 100. So if it was greater than 100, it would be a adding to the factor, right? It'd be say it was 500, it'd be a 5 times score multiplier. If it was 100, it'd be a 1 times. If it was half, if it was 50 pixels, it would only be 1/2. Var speed scaling factor equals, and then I gotta find the speed somewhere. Let's check for speed. That's min max on the game. I think it set it in the game loop as well. Let's see where it uses it. Okay, so it got passed into the initialize function. So my faller initialize function should have it. And I never used it. That doesn't make sense. New faller.initialize. New faller came from here with faller, and I passed in. Oh, I say initialize, not the constructor. Initialize. Did I not have it at the top? How very clever of me. See, I don't give you guys I don't only give you guys shit, I give myself shit too. So let me fix that by moving this up to the top. Got my faller options. There's my options speed. This the options.speed. And again, I'm getting basically bitten in the butt because I didn't set it to something here that was, if you don't, that's why I like to put the options or like whatever value is going to be up at the top. That way I know what to expect it to have that's going to be set later. Like I forgot that options was actually going to be an object. And one of the things it's going to have in there is fall delta. And the other one was speed. Even though I'm going to obliterate that object, at least now if I go back to it, I know that it's going to have those things. I can easily reference it without having to go and search in my functions to figure out how the hell I wrote it. So speed scaling factor is this.options.speed. And so the faster, the more the score. Speed is going to be somewhere like what? Or 220 to 500. And that's random speed 20 to 500. So let's say by 250. So the score value then would be this dot score value is equal to, let's say, 5 times width scaling factor times speed scaling factor. So if it was a block moving at, or a block that was 100 pixels wide and was moving at a speed of 250, then you'd get 5 points. If it was moving at speed 500, you'd get 10 points. If it was moving at 500 and it was 200 wide, you'd get 20 points. Make sense? Now, it may not be working correctly. I'm not guaranteeing that at all. But first thing we need to do now is on death, award the player that score. So I'm probably going to do that in the game. Now, there's a difference between dying when it resets the game versus when it hits the bottom. So I'm going to have to go down to its death function, faller.prototype.die, and determine if it was killed from hitting the bottom or something else. So I'm going to put into here termination due to bounds. And down here, I'm going to say if, now there is something you can do in ECMAScript 6 that you can do a default value. I am not going to use that because it's not supported entirely, I believe. So I'm going to use the more accepted one, which is if it's undefined, termination due to bounds is equal to false. So that way, my existing function calls to it don't require me to change those. It'll just assume it was false if it wasn't. And then I can go and try to find where I have my death by falling, or death by going out of bounds. And I believe that check I don't think that's in the faller. I believe that's in the, because we got this dot handle heartbeat goes to this dot fall. This dot fall just moves it. There's something like check bounds, I recall correctly. Check valid player position. Spawn check. What was it? Check position? Oh yeah, there's check position there. Oh yeah, there you go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put here, I'm going to put this dot die true. I'm passing in true because I want it to count the score for it. And then up in the, or down in the die function, before I tell it to remove, I'm also going to say this dot parent dot, I don't know, award score or something like that. I don't know if I have something like that up there yet. Award score, and this would be this dot score value. Or award player score. And then up in the game, I would have a score and make sure I don't have it somewhere else. Internal score, that's the player. Player score update. That's just the one for the interval one. Okay. Probably need to change those function names a little bit then. It's equal to function value this dot current player dot score plus equals value, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that function from here. Hello. So I can call this function up here, add to the score, and see what happens. All right. Let's see what explodes. Oh. Okay, that seems to be working. That big, ooh, big points. Yeah. Big point for big, fat, fast falling block. So of course, then we'll have to go through and add in, tweak the values, tweak the speeds, and then add in the difficulty. We have a few more minutes. I guess we can try the difficulty thing. Game dot pause. No, pause game. Pause game. So what I could do is Dodger game. I'm getting a lot of game loop stuff, game settings. Let's see now. Scoring. Initial difficulty interval is, let's say, 5 seconds. We could have it be linear, like every X number or something like that just gets it a little bit slightly harder. So current difficulty interval is 5. And then last difficulty update is null. So when was the last time I updated it? I can try trying to do some sort of, or I can just say like, I think I'd rather do it. It doesn't matter. Doing math no matter what, no matter where I'm doing it. So in my game loop, do something like this dot difficulty update check. This dot difficulty update check is equal to function. So I need to set this equal to the current time. So in my initialize scoring, I could probably do it in there. That's, say, this dot initialize difficulty. So this dot, what was it? Scoring. Last difficulty update. How do I want to do this? Do Windows.performance not now, but that'd be kind of weird. Yeah. Also, I need to change the current this dot scoring dot current difficulty interval is equal to this dot scoring dot initial difficulty interval. Just to reset it back. So when we make a reset game, we'd have to call that. And you can see how like your initialized functions and over time your initialized functions and your game loop functions can be just this sort of cascade of different function calls as you add in things. But it's a lot better than having whole blocks of code in there that you have to decipher. At least now I know, well, it creates players area, it creates the player stats, it creates the player, attaches keyboard handlers, starts the game loop, creates the followers, initializes the scoring, initializes the difficulty. It does all those things. We know what happens. Okay. We initialize the scoring. We were doing something about handling of the difficulty update check. So if this dot scoring dot initial, no, not initial, it's last difficulty update plus current difficulty interval. If the difficulty update plus the interval was less than window.performance.now, and of course we have to increase those values because of course that should be like, then up here should be like 5,000 because it's milliseconds. Okay, where was I? There it is. If it's less than that, then I need to update the score, the difficulty. And let's just say for now that this dot difficulty, I think it is, this dot game settings. Oh, I forgot to do that here. Game settings dot scoring.
All right.
Difficulty. Let's say plus equals 0.1. If I recall correctly, when we create the followers, it updates that value based upon that difficulty setting. So if we look at our create followers, there it is. We use difficulty somewhere around here. For that one, what's that? What's that? No, I think we never actually did. I think I intended to. So when we created followers, there was supposed to be some sort of like multiplier about how many it spawned per second. It was the check per second. That's what it was. There was the, follower spawn. Is that what you basically said? Yeah. Follower spawn chance check. Follower spawn chance check. There it is. Yeah. Missed it somehow. So over time, that should make it so that more followers can spawn. All right. Error line 32. Cannot set property last difficulty of line 53. Pause. Line 53. Oh, do that game settings again. Also, I want to put in something so I know it's happening. Also, I need to change it, or also keep doing it over and over again. So I need to change the last difficulty update. Is equal to window.performance.now and console.log difficulty now plus and this. Difficulty now 1.1. Oh, that was quick. 1.2. 1.3. Yeah, because it's got that. It's trying to put a partial value into a binary number. It's like if you try to do like 1 divided by 3, you get 33.33 repeating. That's the binary equivalent of like, I don't know what to do. So I need to probably bump it up by more than like 0.1. Well, that's just randomly trying things. What was the far chance? It's the faller population percent chance.
Where did they actually increase it?
Huh?
Where did they actually increase
It. Where did we do it? In the difficulty update check. So it increases right here. You just do a 1 times increase, or add 1 to it and see what it does. Also, going to increase the decrease this for testing purposes, make it increase every second. So now it should be having a much higher chance of spawning them theoretically, if it's using that.
It seems like they're spawning less often.
Oh, that's right. It was supposed to go the other way around. I remember now. Because it's a percent chance, and it was right. Okay. Okay, so when we first did it before, the lower the score got, the more that it was. Minus equals 0.1. But it's still only checking every 1 second, so the max you can do is one at a time. But now it's just going to spawn every second. Okay, that should work. Now change it back to something more sensible. Let's say like 10,000. Oh, bam. Big block to the head. So another second here, it'll increase the difficulty by about 10%. But now we're only checking at once a second. So that's kind of limiting our difficulty factor, because now it can only spawn up to 1 second, which now I'm glad that we did that thing where we made it dependent upon the interval, because now I can take the interval and bring it down to like half a second instead. So I can take my interval right here and do 500 instead. I think it's definitely favoring the right side sometimes.
Okay, so why did we use minus equals rather than plus?
Because the multiplier is affecting on the percentage chance of spawning another one. So look at the, where is that? There it is. So the faller population percent chance, if you look up here, is 0.2. So there's a 20% chance of spawning another one. And that percent chance decreases the more spawners that there are. So doing it times 0.5 would increase the percent chance that there's going to be a spawner, because it's a, so it's the faller.length, so it's like, say, 5. 5 times 0.2 is 100%. So there's 100%, you have to get above 100% to spawn one, which means it's impossible. So if you have 0.5 as the difficulty, that means now you have to get above 50%. So it's the value that you're targeting towards in terms of the ratio compared to the number of items that are falling currently. So if there's 0 fallers, then there's 100% chance. Oh, sorry, it has to get above 0% chance to make a new one, and so it's guaranteed to make a faller. If there are, because it's 0.2 as a difficulty by default, or it's a population percent chance of 0.2, that means if there were 2, there would be a 50% chance. But if the difficulty was 0.5, there would be, you have to get above 0%, because it would take that 50 and take it, sorry, 25%. It would take it down to 25%, so you have a 75% chance of spawning a faller. I know it doesn't make much sense. We kind of did it in the convoluted factor. But check it out. You'll probably do it better. Git add dot, git commit -m. Added faller scoring based on size and speed. Added difficulty scaling based on time interval. I think that's about it. Git branch, git checkout dev, git merge scoring, git push origin dev. Okay, git checkout master, git, oops, checkout master, git merge dev. Right. And that is that.